bring your selected ones to life. It is only until the well runs empty that you realize how valuable water is. Let's face it, however, some individuals don't just let the planet go to waste. They scream about being thirsty after poisoning it first. This is the harsh reality. They had no idea that this day would arrive. They never envisioned a world in which your absence would be more painful than your presence. But now they're having trouble breathing, fighting for the breath of your life that they so carelessly disregarded. It's even supported by science. According to psychologists, withdrawing symptoms might be triggered by losing a crucial person in one's life. Withdrawal, indeed, because they were hooked to you, whether they acknowledge it or not. Your enthusiasm, stability, and comfort were invaluable. They're going cold turkey now. Furthermore, the procedure is not elegant. They thought there would be no repercussions for crossing the boundary. However, they are now trapped in the space you left. The greatest thing is that their revelation is just getting started. Hold on tight. First of all, they were unprepared for the consequences of their own behavior. They never imagined that the consequences of their conduct would be so dire. At the time, they were irresponsible, thoughtless in their speech, contemptuous of your emotions, and behaving as if you were only another fleeting moment in their lives. They thought you would always be accessible, always be there, and always be prepared to dismiss it and go on as if nothing had occurred. The stillness is different today, however. It isn't the calm sort. It weighs a much. It's noisy, and that's all you have to worry about. They're beginning to realize that a void in your life doesn't just disappear when you lose the person who formerly occupied it. It reverberates, and that echo is reminding them of all they've taken for granted at the moment. The messages that used to arrive every time. Lost. They seldom appreciated the support. Not a trace. The warmth they didn't need to request. You took it with you. They most likely assured themselves that it wouldn't matter, that everything would be well, and that life would go on as usual. However, they were mistaken because they failed to take into account how much of their lives revolved around you. Your dependability, your vitality, and your presence. Because the things they earlier disregarded were truly the foundation supporting them, they are now having difficulty functioning. Moreover, without that base, they are faltering. Realizations like these don't come easily. They may divert their attention, seem indifferent, or even persuade others that they don't care. Ultimately, however, when kids are allowed to think for themselves, they are aware of the reality. They won't be ready for the loss of someone who really matters. They believe they could treat you any way they pleased and leave you unpunished. However, individuals are forced to confront themselves by life, and they are now confronting the consequences of their own decisions. Second, they mistook your presence for permanency. They didn't believe you would really go. They thought you were here to stay. Similar to furniture. Always present, always accessible. They may utilize it without any consideration. They thought you were obligated because you were consistent. Your tolerance for frailty and your boundless capacity for forgiveness. They might continue to draw from it. However, individuals are not objects. When people get weary, they go. Right now, they're coming to understand how much they depended on you. It was more than simply the major issues. It was the children. They seldom paid attention to the way you listened, how you arrived, and how you filled in the blanks without being asked. Now that they're gone, they notice them. They thought you would always be there to make amends, to show empathy, to give them another opportunity. And people stopped appreciating you as a result of that presumption. However, individuals often learn lessons the hard way in life. They are now bearing the consequences of their own negligence. They are seeing how much room you occupied in their universe and how empty it seems in your absence. It goes beyond just missing you. It's about recognizing that they were never as independent as they believed. The steadiness you provided was what they needed. But because it's gone, they can only see that now. Not all regret strikes at once. Slowly, it creeps in the unexpectedly calm times. The lack of your messages. Where your voice was, there was quiet. The knowledge that nobody else is as concerned as you are. And despite their best efforts to divert their attention, they are unable to shake one notion. This is what they did to themselves. They thought you were here to stay. They must now accept the fact that you weren't number 3. Apologies can't turn back time, they discovered too late. It takes time for regret to seep in. It is loud and evident, yet it does not appear immediately. It waits. For a while, it gives them the impression that they got away with it, that there will be no repercussions as life progresses. Then, one day, when they least expect it, it becomes ingrained in their memory, strikes a chord, and repeats itself in their mind. It dawns on them. What they did cannot be undone. They believed that apologizing worked like magic and that all they needed to do to set things right was to speak the words, and everything would return to normal. They believed they were in charge of the timetable and could choose when they were ready to show concern. But life isn't like that. Sorry doesn't go back in time. Damage is not repaired by them. When people have had enough, they don't bring them back. They are now beginning to realize that certain things cannot be reversed. The casual phrases they used, the decisions they made, and the way they treated you like a throwaway object. Those items are heavy. And just because people feel awful doesn't mean the weight goes away. Even worse, they are aware that you've given them opportunities. More times than they deserved, you showed them tolerance, compassion, and the benefit of the doubt. And they squandered each and every one. They are forced to face the unpleasant reality that they could have performed better but chose not to, because they lost something that was significant to them. And there's no remorse now. The reality that they made a poor decision when it counted most cannot be altered by a well-crafted apology or a last-ditch effort to put things right. They believed they had time. They assumed you would wait for them to gather themselves all the time. Now, however, they see the reality. When someone who really cared for you passes away, you are not given a second chance. You just have to accept the remorse. Fourth place, they believed that losing you would mean losing someone, but losing you caused them to lose themselves. Was more than just losing a person. They lost a whole aspect of themselves that they were unaware was connected to you. At first, they failed to see it. They believed that all they were giving up was a connection, a friendship, or a relationship. However, as time went on, a few things began to seem strange. They felt different from the world around them, but more than that, they felt different, and not in a positive way. They no longer have the side you brought out. Perhaps it was a more motivated, lighter, or safer version of themselves. Perhaps it was the one with guidance that seemed clear and someone to rely on. However, they also lost that person when they lost you. Their current self is one that they hardly recognize. One that seems more drab, empty, and unsure. They were unaware of how much of who they were was influenced by your encouragement, your presence, and your ability to see promise in them even when they couldn't. The way you gave them hope that they could do more. They may have assumed that they will always be that person, therefore they may have taken it for granted. But the gaps began to emerge without you, without the vitality you brought into their lives. They no longer see the same person in the mirror as they did when you were around. They see someone letting a genuine opportunity pass them by. They see someone who had something valuable but neglected to safeguard it. They are also unable to avoid the truth. Looking back at them, they believe that losing you would just need them to get used to living without you. However, they really lost a piece of who they were. They may never return. Fifth, they didn't think there was a line, so they went over it. They didn't believe in boundaries. They pretended to be able to push limits, test your patience, and take more than they gave. They thought you would always be the greater person, always understand, and always forgive. And they continued because they thought there were no actual repercussions. When you hesitated or retreated, they disregarded all of your warning signs. The way your energy began to change. They persuaded themselves that you were just going through a phase and that you would still be there when they turned around, regardless of what they did. So they pushed harder. They took more. Since they didn't think you were someone they had to earn, they completely stopped taking your emotions into account. You were only there. However, they were mistaken. And now the evidence is your absence. You didn't depart with a spectacular burst. You didn't cause any trouble. You just stopped. Ceased to appear. Give up trying to justify them. Give up acting as if they had already crossed the boundary. Then it dawned on them. They couldn't use this as another opportunity to influence the situation. This really happened. The burden of their own conceit now rests on them. They believed that they were exempt from the rules, that they could behave any way they pleased, and that you would never abandon them. But now that they're sitting in the void they made, they understand that there are lines. Additionally, some individuals disappear when they cross them. Sixth, they participated in the game but never anticipated losing. They believed they were in charge. They managed every action they took, every statement they made, and every circumstance. The whole thing was a part of the game. They believed they were winning. They put your endurance, commitment, and patience to the test, certain that they would always be in charge, know of how hard they tried. They thought they could establish the conditions, the guidelines, and the timing and course of events. The problem with gaming, however, is that reality inevitably intervenes and doesn't give a damn about their delusions of power. They are now caught up in the disaster they made, even though they believed they could pull the strings. They made a mistake. They thought you would comply at all times, that you would continue to prove yourself, keep trying, and keep persevering. However, you didn't. You took a step. They were the only ones left standing when the game they believed they were winning abruptly ended. They're now having a hard time comprehending how they lost what they believed to be safe, unable to understand why the same strategies that formerly worked no longer function, finding it difficult to operate without the approval, focus, and effort they took for granted. They tried to keep one step ahead for a long time. What they can do now, however, is reflect on what they have destroyed. Even worse, they have no idea how to solve it. They never learned how to really connect because they were too busy manipulating. They never thought you'd have a breaking point since they spent so much time pushing your boundaries. They now have to face the fact that they didn't just lose you. The game was lost by them. In the first place, they had no business playing. Seventh place, when you left, they chuckled. But now they're not giggling. They first dismissed it. Perhaps they even chuckled. The fact that your departure was just a brief inconvenience didn't matter, they assured themselves. Not much more. Perhaps they even exaggerated it, seeming indifferent, cracking jokes, and assuming they were in charge. They persuaded themselves that they could not be touched, that they wouldn't be impacted by your absence. However, the truth will eventually come to light. The quiet that used to seem liberating now feels oppressive. There's more to the empty space you left. It's notably deserted. It's now hard to overlook the things they used to brush off as insignificant: your presence, your support, and the way you made life simpler. They believed that it would be easy to move on and that they could swap you out like a light bulb. However, nothing fits. Distractions are insufficient. What you brought, no one else brings. And the laughing stops at that point. All of the things they lost are now weighing heavily on them. And it's no longer amusing. It's not amusing. It's not a game. It's the truth. The individual whose absence is now bothering them is the same person they believed they didn't need. Worst of all, they are unable to return. They never thought about what would happen if they were mistaken, since they spent so much time behaving as if you were interchangeable. They're sitting in the mess they created now, understanding that you stole more than just your presence when you left. The type of life they didn't value was taken away by you. And now the joke is on them, regardless of how hard they attempted to laugh it off. Eighth, they didn't just lose you. The form of existence that featured you is no longer available to them. They first believed they were just losing you. One individual, one relationship, one phase of their existence. They believed they could proceed with little alteration, as if your departure would just result in a vacant place at the table. However, reality is now setting in. It was more than simply losing a person while you were gone. Losing the whole version of life that came with you was the main concern. They miss more than just you. They long for the times when you were present, the ease with which the talks flowed, how they could come to you for help. Without hesitation, life was lighter, warmer, and easier. They missed the solace of knowing that someone really cared for them and had a deeper understanding of them than anybody else. They missed the moments they used to dismiss as little but now understood to be crucial, the security and the confidence. And that life is no longer there. Even if they are still there and doing their duties, something doesn't seem right. There's less genuine laughing. The triumphs don't seem as satisfying. The difficult days seem heavier than they used to be. You were once a source of stability, a location where they felt comfortable, and a presence that brought order to the situation. Everything is different without it, thus everything seems different. Knowing that they can't just return to that existence is the most difficult aspect. The door has been closed. They have to live with the version of life without you now that they have made their decisions. The version they never imagined they would have to live with. And no matter how hard they try, they can't avoid the reality. You weren't just lost. Because you were in that world, they lost it. And it cannot be restored by whatever they do now. The ninth, nothing fits, despite their belief that they could fill the gap. They believe they could take your place. They believe that by adding new acquaintances, transient diversions, and pointless chatter, they might occupy the void you left. It seemed to work at first, moving constantly and laughing artificially. Anything to save them from dealing with the burden of their losses. But the vacuum still exists despite their best efforts to hide it. And it becomes more clear that nothing fits the more they attempt to fill it. None of them feel the same, yet they try to strike up fresh discussions. Although the words are present, there is no link. They attempt to replicate their previous level of ease with you. It's artificial, however, forced hollow. Although they know deep down that they are only avoiding the reality, they convince themselves that everything is okay and that they have moved on. It is impossible to replace what they have lost. They find it difficult since they never anticipated feeling this way. They believe that they could easily adapt to losing you and use it as a diversion. Distractions, however, have a limit. The thoughts get louder, the nights grow quieter, and then all of a sudden they are confronted with what they have been trying to avoid. The knowledge that what they had lost was genuine. They believe that the emptiness might be filled with superficial relationships and pointless rituals. However, not every gap should be filled with something. Some areas are the property of those who really mattered. And now they're learning the hard way, despite their best efforts to act differently. You didn't merely bring anything into their lives. It was all of it. And they will search for a long time without finding anything that even comes close. Number 10. Before the pandemonium turned against them, they were at ease in it. Like it was home, they lived in anarchy, flourished in it, took advantage of it. They were skilled at manipulating events, creating drama, and maintaining enough instability to maintain their advantage. They believed they could push you away, injure you, and then act as if nothing had occurred. Because chaos was never an outcome for them. It was just a game. However, they never thought about what would occur if they lost control of the turmoil. They never paused to consider what would happen when you eventually left for good, since they were so used to controlling your emotions, generating stress, and keeping you off balance. And now that you're gone to take the toll, the mayhem they caused has nowhere else to go. They are being tricked by it. They don't know how to stop the instability that they previously used as a weapon from destroying their own tranquility. No one remains at fault. There is no one left to fight. They spent so long making things tumultuous that they forgot what it was to have anything solid. And now there is no one left to follow them, to soothe them, to clean up the mess. And now that they have nothing solid to cling on, they are drowning in what they believe to be their strength. It's really ironic. They believed that playing with fire would not result in burns. They ultimately realized the truth, however, as they stand amid the ruins of what they destroyed. The mayhem was out of their control. They were constantly under the power of the pandemonium. And now they have nowhere to go without you. 11. They believed that your forbearance was a sign of weakness. They see now that it was strength. They believed they had control over you because of your patience. They believed that your generosity was a sign of weakness and that you were someone they could easily manipulate, since you were able to understand, forgive, and give them another opportunity. They saw your readiness to remain as evidence that you were more in need of them than they were. They never hesitated to take advantage of it as a consequence. Now, however, they see the reality. You weren't weak for being patient. It was power. Trying to understand them when they made things tough and standing by them when they didn't deserve it required strength. Even when they gave you every reason to doubt them, it required courage to trust in them. Above all, it required courage to go. When you at last understood that they would never value what you provided, they now realize that not everyone would have followed your example. Not everyone would have been as concerned as you were, made the same effort as you did, the way you stood by them. That was the type of patience they thought they could find any place. However, they were mistaken. In actuality, it wasn't patience. You did it, and that won't be discovered again. They believed they were in charge and the stronger party. The one has the advantage all the time. They now understand who really had the power all along. However, as they sit with the weight of their defeat, they weren't the ones. You did it. Because true strength isn't about dominance, sway, or success. Knowing when enough is the key. Furthermore, you didn't just take your presence with you when you left. They misread your power for weakness, so you grabbed it. They must now face the fact that they never merited it in the first place. 12. They believed you were in need of them. They understand now how much they needed you. They were completely mistaken. They believed you were in need of them the whole time. They believed they were the winner, the one being pursued, the one with the power to determine the course of events and their timing. They saw your commitment, tolerance, and presence as evidence that you were reliant on them. They never considered questioning what they were receiving from you as a result. Now, however, they see the reality. You weren't in need of them. They were in need of you. They just were unaware of it until you were gone. They were unaware of how much they relied on you, how much you helped to stabilize their lives, and how much easier things were since you were always there to improve things in a subtle manner, lessening the impact of their poor choices. They never considered how much of their identity was molded by your presence or how much of their confidence came from knowing you were on their side. However, the disparity is now indisputable. They are suffering in unexpected ways from the lack of your enthusiasm, encouragement, and comprehension. They thought they could continue as if nothing had occurred without you. However, reality is proving them wrong. The days seem longer, and the solitude seems heavier. The individuals they used to hang out with don't provide the same warmth, depth, or feeling of belonging as you did. What's the worst? They are unable to reverse it. They can't go back in time and alter how they treated you. They are unable to change the past to fit their current understanding. They are left with no choice but to sit with the burden of knowing that they were never the one in charge or the one with strength. Although they believed they were your anchor, you were really theirs. And now that you are no longer there, it is they who are adrift, lost in the place where you were number 13. They didn't accept karma until it was associated with them. They never believed that they were subject to karma. They thought they could do anything they wanted, harming others, controlling circumstances, and making self-centered decisions without ever having to deal with the consequences. They believed they could dodge responsibility indefinitely, that life would always work in their favor, and that they were untouchable. However, karma doesn't follow their schedule. There is no warning sent. It doesn't inquire about their readiness. It just shows up on schedule. They most likely ignored the indications at first. A missed chance here, a little annoyance there. Karma, however, isn't usually obvious at first. Before it becomes something people can't ignore, it begins quietly, like a whisper. The same treachery they previously wrote off as unimportant is now occurring to them in ways that are very painful, and the same games they played are now being played on them. They are the ones experiencing it now. They now comprehend what it's like to be disappointed when someone they trusted leaves and leaves them wondering. They understand what it's like to doubt everything, to lie awake and relive the moments when everything went wrong, to feel helpless in a circumstance they used to be in control of. They also know deep down that this isn't a coincidence, despite their desire to think so. When you believe you can take and take without ever giving back, this is what occurs. This is the result of assuming that after spending so much time denying people kindness, the world owes you mercy. The concept of karma made them giggle. It was referred to as superstition. It's no longer a hypothesis. However, with their own decisions staring them in the face, they live with it. What's the worst? There's no getting out of it. They have completely reversed the harm they caused. They are now forced to confront the reality. Not all karma is genuine. Their name is on it. 14. You gave them control over themselves, but they sought power over you. They want authority over your feelings, responses, and choices. They want control, ultimate decision, the power to control the course of events. For a while, maybe they did. Perhaps they believed they had you just where they wanted you, doubting oneself, demonstrating your value, attempting to satisfy someone who was never content. However, you did the one thing they didn't anticipate. You relax. All of the authority they believed they had over you vanished at that instant. Because you can only exert control over someone when they remain, participate, and are still concerned enough to respond. However, you seize that power and put it in its proper position, back in their grasp. They can't blame you anymore. They are unable to control the circumstances. Their anxieties cannot be projected onto you. All they have left is themselves. And that's the one conflict for which they were never ready. So it was simple to dominate you. It served as a diversion and a means of avoiding facing their own shortcomings, remorse, and emptiness. But now there's a shield without you. They must confront everything. Every moment, every deceptive game, every self-centered decision. They disregarded your emotions as if they were unimportant. Nobody remains to bear the consequences of their deeds. There was no one left to bear their shame. And they'll never have to cope with something as difficult as that. Not losing you, facing oneself, because they know the truth in their hearts. They lost more than one individual. The one person who was prepared to embrace them in spite of their imperfections was gone. And that shame will follow them no matter how hard they try to avoid it. Not because it's what you desire. It's because they made it themselves, not because you want retribution. Ultimately, they believed they were in charge. However, they never really had control. They thought they could play games, push boundaries, and take without repercussions. However, life has a way of bringing everything into balance. And now it's they who are having trouble adjusting to life without what they formerly disregarded. You weren't the only one they lost. They lost the security you offered, the comfort of your presence, and the wholeness of life that came from having you in it. They believed they could just go on, but instead they are confronted with the reality that what they have been avoiding for so long is what is truly keeping them together. Distractions cannot bridge the gap. Nothing can replace what has been lost. They might act as if they don't feel the consequences of their decisions, reject their regrets, and place the blame on the situation. But they know in their hearts. This goes beyond just losing a loved one. For the first time, they must face themselves without the support of your love, compassion, and patience. And that's a reality that hurts far more than they ever imagined. So give it to them to sit with. Allow them to fully experience the consequences of their loss. Because to your freedom, you've taken back your authority. You have entered a life that safeguards your energies. Your affection is appreciated, and your value is acknowledged. And that's what separates you from them. You gain knowledge. You developed. You relax. However, they are just now coming to the realization that they were never in a position of authority. You were, and it will be far too late by the time they realize it. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss anything like this if this resonated with you and you felt every word. If you are aware that they are now experiencing the consequences of their own decisions, hit the like button. Tell me by leaving a comment. What was the most important lesson you took away from the experience? Telling someone they're not alone is sometimes the greatest thing you can do for them. So of course, share this with someone who needs to hear it. There will be more impactful stuff soon. Keep an eye out. Remain resilient. Above everything, keep within your control.